on the Penn State! Love having Penn State.
We had to lock the gates, get everybody out. It's sold out. In number 1 ranked Ohio State, weather gloomy and rainy on Friday, supposed to be okay.
Where the linebacker are you?
Fanfare aside, is simply yelling Penn State enough to define a student body? Who is Joe Paterno even talking to when he growls, "Come to Penn State"? But maybe we're asking the wrong questions. Who does the Penn State administration want on campus? Critics of state institutions, such as Penn State, have been questioning the admissions policies geared toward increased out-of-state enrollment, as these students must pay higher tuition rates, creating a larger university budget. Ever since the 2008 recession, state universities, which rely on funding from the state to offset some of their costs, have had to change their admission strategies in order to balance their budget, opting to accept more out-of-state applicants in the hopes that they will bring in more money. Here's an example. 2 students apply to Penn State. The first lives in-state, while the second lives out-of-state. Both of them are equally qualified. Because Penn State is a state university, one would assume Penn State would accept the in-state applicant. But in examining the admissions process with a fiscal mindset, it only makes sense for Penn State to offer admission to the out-of-state applicant. An out-of-state applicant offers $34,000 of tuition, while the in-state applicant only offers $23,000. So now, who do you think is more likely to be accepted? Correct, the out-of-state applicant. It's simple, really. He is worth $11,000 more dollars. While admissions offices around the country report that the applicant pool is growing larger and becoming increasingly competitive, state universities also recognize columnist Sarah Schweiker's words of the Boston Globe. She writes, "Out-of-state students offer immediate monetary rewards as state funding of higher education lags." But why are states so reluctant to appropriate money to these universities? What was the catalyst for a lack of funding among higher education? Well, look none other to the American economy.
Good evening. This is an extraordinary period for America's economy. Over the past few weeks, many Americans have felt anxiety about their finances and their future. I understand their worry and their frustration. We've seen triple-digit swings in the stock market. Major financial institutions have teetered on the edge of collapse, and some have failed.
At one point, the market fell as if down a well over 700 points.
We are in the midst of a serious financial crisis, and the federal government is responding with decisive action.
$700 billion, a staggering number, but only a part of the cost of the failed Bush economic policies.
They're nuts! They know nothing!
Kramer.
I have not seen it like this since I went 5 bid for 500,000 shares of Citigroup when I got hit in 1990. This is a different kind of market, and the Fed is asleep!
Thank you for listening. May God bless you.
What if there aren't any solutions? The money has to come from somewhere. The cold reality is that state legislators can no longer appropriate sufficient amount of funds to its universities during this time of recession. State universities can no longer rely on the taxpayer to support their budget. Currently, Pennsylvania's funding only accounts for 19% of Penn State's total operating costs. And while state appropriations have marginally increased by $20 million over the past decade, Penn State's operating costs have increased at a more rapid rate, forcing Penn State to depend more on tuition as a source of revenue. It's a matter of fiscal realities, says Mark Emmert, president of the University of Washington. Public universities survive on a combination of tuition revenue and state financial support. If one goes down, the other one has to go up if you want to maintain your capacity. But with already high tuition rates and the fear of raising them further, what can colleges do to balance their budget while still appeasing those who pay the tuition bills? Increase out-of-state enrollment. According to the Washington Post, many of the nation's top public universities accepted non-resident students in greater numbers this year, hoping to increase, or at least sustain, a pool of incoming freshmen who pay 2 to 3 times the tuition charged to locals. The College of William and Mary has raised its out-of-state enrollment by 3% since 2006. The University of Washington has raised their out-of-state enrollment by 4% since 2004. The University of Iowa has raised its out-of-state enrollment by 9% since 2000. Michigan State had doubled its out-of-state enrollment since 1999. The University of Massachusetts at Amherst and Rutgers University plans to increase out-of-state enrollment by 15% over the next decade. The University of Illinois also plans to increase out-of-state enrollment by 5% in the coming years. New England schools such as the University of Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine have already begun plans to increase out-of-state enrollment since 2006. The University of California, Berkeley has gone so far to admit more out-of-state students this year, in the hopes that this will anger California residents into pushing state legislators to provide more funding. As Tom Mortison, a senior scholar at the Pell Institute, says, it's revenue strategy. If the state is badly underfunding you, you pull every string possible. Some states like Florida and North Carolina, however, have responded to this growing problem by putting caps on non-resident enrollment. Other states like Virginia are trying to pass legislation on capping out-of-state enrollment and keeping state universities, primarily state universities. So how does Penn State figure into this controversy? Well, the Penn State administration really hasn't made a decision regarding out-of-state enrollment. But when looking at out-of-state enrollment at University Park over the past 10 years, there has been a gradual increase of 8% in out-of-state residents. Is this trend a telltale for upcoming state debate amongst lawmakers, college applicants, and university officials? Perhaps. Only time will tell. But for now, expect your tuition bill to increase.